Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, friends from around the world, to another exciting tour with Pretty Gritty Tours. I'm your host, entrepreneur, tour guide, adventurer, Captain Chris Stodinger, and it's good to be back. This is our first public tour of 2021, and I've missed you guys so much. If at any point tonight you want to comment along, please do so, whether you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube. And for those of you who are joining us after the fact that this is live, please feel free to continue to comment. We are always interested in what you guys have to say, your questions, and most importantly, the times that you correct my historic information. I really look forward to that, genuinely. Tonight, we get to explore Washington State a little bit farther than we normally do. We're going outside of the Tacoma Puget Sound radius and encompassing the entirety of Washington State and looking at something that's near and dear to my heart, castles. So if you guys are ready, let's embark on a journey, shall we? Technically, I did castles and forts of Washington State. It's a sticky topic when you're looking across the state here. But if we're going to talk about castles, here's the specification that I was originally taught. That to be a castle, it has to be a privately owned, fortified structure. If it's not fortified, it's a mansion or a palace. If it's not privately owned, then it's a fort. And there's some gray area in and amongst that definition tonight, but I think that's our base understanding of what a castle is. Privately owned. Technically, it's supposed to be by nobility, but since we don't have nobility in America, we're just going to say rich people. Privately owned by rich people and fortified or defended. And like I said, I've already broken my rules with half the places on this list, but I think they still fit in the castle category. And honestly, I'm gonna do whatever I want. So let's head on out. Oh, I already got sweet questions coming in here. Thank you guys. I'm glad that we're branching out here. Faye, come on. Technically, no castles in Tacoma, but we're branching out, if you will, because we are going to talk a little bit about Stadium High, which I don't want to get into too much right now, but while not technically a castle, I'm going to still make the argument for it. This is located in southern Washington. It fits the castle criteria because it's basically just a fortification and privately owned castle. This particular gem right here, I can vouch for enthusiastically because it is a castle, and this used to be my castle in the not too distant past, where some youths growing up have tree houses. I had this little gem right here, and we'll talk about that. Look at that beauty. Real quality craftsmanship right there. Look at these glorious nerds right here. They look like they're having the best time of their life. And yeah, they absolutely were. I feel like you've learned a little bit about me right now. Also, these castles are coming up today, and they all fit the castle criteria. So, you guys ready? Hey, Harold, we're counting you as nobility. And as soon as you own a fortified estate, you're coming on my castle list. So the first castle we're talking about tonight is Congdon Castle. Congdon Castle is located in Yakima, or just outside of Yakima. It is a privately owned estate, and it is built entirely with locally quarried stone. And when you're looking at this beauty right here, it's easy to understand how it made this criteria. It was built starting in 1914, completed in 1915, and belonged to an industrialist entrepreneur by the name of Chester Congdon. He was an attorney. He was a mining corporate billionaire. I guess he was technically a millionaire, but by today's standards, I'm pretty sure he would have made it into the billionaire category. And he had a massive mansion in the Midwest on the Great Lakes area, but then he built an even larger castle out here in the Yakima Valley. And he got to see it completed in 1915, and then a year after, in 1916, he passed away, tragically. What's so amazing to me about Congdon Castle is the allure and mystery of it. It is not only a home now, it has been a home its entire history. It was built for the Congdon family in 1914 and continues to be, to the best of my knowledge, still owned by the Congdon family today. And entirely private, only if you know like someone in the family can you possibly get in, but it is deluxe. It has 80 rooms. It is for sure haunted. It has an underground swimming pool. And I'm trying to think of those 80 rooms, some just ridiculous number of bedrooms in there. What's crazy about this is that it's also attached to what was at one time the largest cherry orchard, non-confirmed, in the United States, possibly the world. Chester, right before this house was completed, used it as his launching point for a global trip. He wanted to go explore essentially the Pacific Rim and just kind of scope out the competition. And while he was in New Zealand, he took note of their orchards and put down a journal entry where it's like, well, we've got nothing to worry about back home. Everybody else's orchards suck in comparison to mine back in Washington. And for the most part, he was pretty right. So he departed from California. He took the train from Yakima down and then went all the way around the Pacific Rim and then ended up back in Washington State. His ship arrived in Seattle and then he took the train home to his now completed estate, Congdon Castle, back there in Yakima. But he has some amazing photos of him just like cruising the world like a rich dude doing his thing. Took extensive notes and photographs and then brought back quite a bit of art, which is privately displayed in Congdon Castle. It's actually after Chester's death, though, that things get super weird because his daughter, living in their main Congdon mansion, not castle, back in the Midwest, in the 1970s, she and her nurse end up getting murdered by her adopted daughter. This is such a convoluted story, but stay with me here. Elizabeth Congdon, the daughter of Chester Congdon, gets murdered late in her life by her adopted daughter, Marjorie, and is embroiled now in this massive scheme. But they find out that Marjorie killed her and then tried to shuffle off all of this extra money, end up arresting her, and then the tragedy just shook the rest of the family into complete solitude, where the Congdon family that was remaining ends up living not quite in isolation, but certainly away from the public eye, shut away in this private estate where they continue making money off of their prized cattle and their massive orchards out in the Yakima Valley down there. And so the story has gone on and on. There is a widely held rumor from private emails that have been circled around from people just asking questions that it is the ghost of Elizabeth looking for vengeance that now stalks the 80 rooms of Congdon Castle today. And it's very difficult, if not entirely impossible, to get any comment from the family as to whether this is true or not. But there have also been a few deaths on the public land around there, including a family friend wrote a series of letters about how his little brother ended up drowning in a creek just outside the home out there. So there's no confirmed identity to the haunting out there, but pretty much anyone that I've ever spoken to who's ever been inside of the Congdon Castle or known people who have 100% believes that the haunting continues today. So Congdon Castle is one of my favorites because it's so mysterious and continues after 100 years to have that allure of mystery to it and a ghost inside, but I don't think it's as notable as its neighbor, Charbonneau Castle. Charbonneau Castle is also out in the Yakima Valley, and it belongs to, or once did, this woman right here, personal hero of mine, Belinda Mulrooney Charbonneau. She, late in her life, ends up building Charbonneau Castle in Yakima Valley, but she starts out born in Ireland in 1872, immigrates to the United States, where she grows up in Scranton, Pennsylvania, of all places, goes and makes money in Chicago as a housekeeper, and then in her early 20s takes off for the Yukon. And it's in the Yukon that she comes up with this plan where she's like, yeah, everyone's going up to the Yukon and they're going to make a bunch of money off of gold. But what are they not going to have? Comfortable underwear. So she takes up a whole bunch of silk underwear, chocolates, candies, nice soap, all the like niceties of the world. And she makes a killing. She turns out, they estimate a 600% profit, ends up building a hotel in the area where she still caters to that sort of like things that you miss from back home. And people are just eating it up. They can't get enough of it. All these gold miners are shuffling through her new hotel, which I think I've got a picture of for you right here. And she's just breaking in the money. She's selling booze, she's selling niceties, she's selling the comforts of home. And in her deluxe bar, which made $6,000 on the first day of opening, she builds wide slats with openings in them and then has a water sluice underneath it. And every night after everyone is done, well, I guess technically in the morning, done drinking, they would run water through the sluice under the boards, and she would make, they estimate, $100 a day in just gold tailings from the gold dust that would fall out of miners' pockets when they were paying for stuff. Brilliant. I would argue the first and maybe only tactical mistake that she makes in her life is when she marries a gentleman. Let's see. I don't know if I've got the picture of him here. Oh man, I don't. It's too bad. But Count Charles Eugene Charbonneau, French aristocrat, or so he claims. But in fact, he was a champagne salesman and barber who just stylized himself as an aristocrat, moved to the Yukon, and the best thing he ever did was seduce and marry Ms. Charbonneau. So it eventually comes out that not only is he pretty much a terrible person, but he's very, very bad with money. He squanders her first fortune. She divorces him, builds up an even larger fortune with a series of hotels, and then starts retirement down in Yakima with this quaint little castle right here. Now, I'm told that it had a larger wall around it, but the castle itself is still historically accurate. It's on the historic register, even though today it is a coffee shop and florist, no longer a private home, but maintains its historic integrity. And it is a swanky digs, honestly. I really think it's a fantastic spot. If you have the opportunity to go check it out in Yakima, it's one of the great places that you can actually visit because it's now a public store. If you're interested in this miraculous woman's life, she has been portrayed by this Australian actress here, Abby Cornish, in the Discovery Channel 2014 series Klondike, which was produced by Ridley Scott and tells the whole story of all these sweet movers and shakers and history creators that were up in the Klondike at that time. So definitely worth checking out. And I actually don't know if they rent out those rooms upstairs. It's 2021. Anything is possible. We should be looking for castles of our own right now. So here's where I'm venturing away from the strict castle criteria. This is not privately owned. This is a state-owned edifice, but Mount Constitution Tower is a fortification, but it fits the castle motif for me. If you guys have never been to Mount Constitution, it's just over a half a mile up from sea level on Orcas Island, and it is the highest point in the San Juan Islands, but it's also, it has some other cool record, like second highest island in the continental United States. I'm trying to think what its cool title is. I'll get back to you, and for sure someone in the comments knows. But Mount Constitution Tower was built as part of the 1930s Civilian Conservation Corps, and they took all this local stone and built a sweet tower in a state park so that people could have jobs and have a sweet place to visit. And I've got some sweet footage of you guys. Well, I don't have sweet footage of you guys. I have some sweet footage of Mount Constitution Tower, so you can really drink in the views. So this is during, normal times, available for the public to go and visit. It's got a cool sort of gate to it. If you can come into the park with your Discovery Pass, you have the option of climbing to the top of the tower. It's a little bit of a huff, not too bad. And the views, as you can see, are worth it. So definitely worth checking out if you have the opportunity for a road trip / ferry trip. And again, it doesn't quite fit the castle verbatim. It's not privately owned, but it's making my list. And I think everyone just has to deal with it. Another one in the nebulous margin, right on the coast of American Lake, is Thornwood Castle from 1907. Thornwood Castle is privately owned, although the current owners use it as a bed and breakfast. It was originally a fortified English estate that was brought across the ocean, brick by brick, as a labor of love. But to tell that story, we actually have a special guest this evening from CNN, so enjoy.
I used to think that I'd have to travel all the way to Europe to visit a castle, but then I found one right here in America, just outside of Seattle, and it has the most amazing love story.
This is Thornwood Castle. It's named after the wealthy businessman Chester Thorne, who helped found the port of Toma, and his wife, Anna Thorne. This story actually starts in England in the 1500s, where the castle was originally built.
It was built many, many years ago. It was shipped around Cape Horn before the Panama Canal was built. He did this for his wife, Anna.
He shipped it brick by brick on 3 boats, including 100 pieces of stained glass from medieval churches, and rebuilt it here on the shores of American Lake in 1911. A century later, Thornwood Castle is now owned by Deanna Robinson, who bought the 5-acre, 27,000 square foot property to be her own $2 million love nest.
I had to go home and say, honey, I found our dream home. And he said, okay. I said, well, we got to go look at it. And he said, okay, we will. And then I brought him here, and as we pulled onto the front, he goes like, you got to be kidding.
She wasn't, and she had a vision. She wanted others to be able to stay in the castle and experience its 22 bedrooms, 22 bathrooms, and ethereal garden.
Yes, it's a business venture, sort of, but sometimes I just let people come. The minute that they turn and come in, nothing is the same. This is a 500-year-old staircase.
Wow.
And this was her room.
Oh yes, this is feeling very ladylike to me already.
Oh, yes. She liked to be where she could see the garden.
Oh, wow.
This is the best view in the house.
I feel like I'm in a castle.
Well, you are. The real thing. This is Mr. Thorne's room.
Now, of all the rooms in this house, why this one for Mr. Thorne?
Because he wanted to be able to see who came and went out here, and he wanted to be able to see who came and went on the other side. Welcome to Presidential. Teddy Roosevelt spent 10 nights here, and Howard Taft spent 3.
You could spend hours wandering through all 54 rooms. The most impressive part of the castle is the garden.
I feel like I'm about to go into the secret garden.
And it is a secret garden.
Wow.
It is simply stunning. Couples come here to say their I do's in a fairy tale setting. And if Deanna has given you the okay to have your wedding here, it means you've agreed to one very important rule.
Okay, my 50-year rule is this. They have to agree to stay together for 50 years. If they want to discuss a trial separation, they may do so in 50 years. Until then, they get no options.
Do all couples say yes?
Yes. If they're going to get married here, they do. The groom will stand on this side, and the bride will stand right there. and then they turn around, and this is what they see.
Oh.
Just touches my heart, makes my heart pound.
Still after all these years.
Oh, yes.
So there you go, Thornwood Castle, and like I said, it makes the castle criteria. I don't think it's as heavily fortified as some of the other ones, but it is privately owned, and it is now a hotel / bed and breakfast. So if you are looking for your opportunity to go and visit Thornwood Castle, you have the opportunity to do so. And as you may have noticed, they do weddings there as well. And you got to sign that 50-year agreement, which really, if you're getting married, commit, right? So of all the things going on at Thornwood Castle, I do think two notable things. First of all, the first gentleman who had it brought over brick by brick for his lady love was also named Chester. So if you're looking to have your child be successful, consider naming them Chester, apparently, because that's where all the money comes from in Washington State. It is an exquisite property, and yeah, right on the coast of American Lake, so very local to the Tacoma area. You don't have to travel too far to go and experience it. So let's get into some real castle territory, shall we? Just outside of Sedro-Woolley is 100% castle. This is what we're talking about right now. Privately owned, very much fortified. It has its own private bridge with a locking gate on it, and it is just outside of the Seattle area there, if you're not familiar with Sedro-Woolley. And crazy enough, this 2,972 square foot castle is only 3 bed and 2 bath. How that is possible, I am always in awe. It does come with 20 acres of like genuine off the grid rainforest area out there. And it actually has a special permit where it is entirely powered by its own hydroelectricity. It's made of stone, but has a modern interior. It does come with battlements, turrets, and this private bridge, which you can see here. The interior, like this, continues on its private castleway. And it was just built as a whim. The original owner always wanted to live in their own castle. So they had this built, I think, back in the mid-90s, if I'm not mistaken. And what really drew them to the area was the property itself. So it does have a natural swimming pool at the base of a waterfall. The creek does have salmon that spawn up it and has, like I said, 22 acres, privately powered by your own hydroelectric generator. So if you're looking for your own fairy tale castle with quite a bit of grounds out there, the Sedro-Woolley one definitely takes the cake for me and really fits the criteria for being very nicely fortified. You can see they put it up on that ridge there, and while it doesn't technically have a water-filled moat, it does have that moat over the bridge there to prevent would-be intruders. Unfortunately, before you even ask, no, the private bridge is not a drawbridge. But if you've got the cash to burn on a private castle, I'm pretty sure you could make your own drawbridge out of that. In fact, I know a guy who could make you some really fantastic hinges for a modest price. While we're cruising through private castles of people who had a dream, the Denning Castle in Graham, Washington, of all places, is also on a 20-acre plot. I don't know if that's a requirement for the private castle builder, but this is a modest 1,631 square foot castle. It does have 2 turrets and its very own dungeon. And what really takes the cake for me is that this particular castle comes with its own medieval village. This is on the grounds right in the back of the castle, and each of these structures has been zoned and permitted, so you could do really whatever you want. I see space for a blacksmith back there, an apothecary, a baker, a candlestick maker, whatever your heart desires. Another huge, I don't know why I'm so real estate-y right now. Another huge part of this property is that the owner, when he had it built in 1995, had a private wine cellar built adjacent to the dungeon underneath this castle. And yes, It does come with its own armory inside there. To give you a little more intimate look at this place, I believe I've got, here we go. See if we can take you inside here with some stunning drone footage. That tower up at the top, huge selling point. It is part of one of the 3 bedrooms. You actually have to go up around this bottom tower there to access the front door. So it's very much fortified. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most secure during a zombie apocalypse, this gets the Chris Stodiger rating of a solid 8. What knocks it down from a full 10, you might be asking? The lack of spike traps. But again, easy fix. It is basically the village of Middlevale. If you haven't seen the hit indie film Village of Middlevale, starring our very own Paul Richter, look it up on Amazon. You will be very happy you did. And yes, this particular castle in Graham was built in just 1995. It does come with a hot tub, so you've got some wiggle room there. What's interesting about this place, too, is the sort of combination of like legit castle, but real niceties. I like that they splurged on things like an underground wine cellar, but then also wanted to make sure that there was functional plumbing and a hot tub. And no, the original owner decided that I think he lived there for 10 or 15 years after having it built. And then as he was entering what I'm going to call his twilight years, decided that it is a castle that needed to be enjoyed. So he sold it to another family, really hoping and then eventually achieving that they would have a young kid there. So to the best of my knowledge, it was sold, I think, for only like $790,000 about a decade ago, and was then purchased by a family that had a little kid, which really, if you're going to buy a castle, you better have a kid. Just again, personal preference here. So let's take you a little bit farther there. There's that entrance again. Just getting honorable mention and a nod are Fort Casey and Fort Warden. With Fort Flagler in there, or Flagler, they form the Triangle of Fire. So right at the, essentially the choke point, as you're coming from the Pacific, trying to enter into the Puget Sound, there's a very tight triangle with a U.S. military fort on each of those corners out there. This is Fort Casey right here. This is, of course, Fort Warden, as most of you may know from our previous virtual tour, where we actually got to go and look at Fort Warden. And while the batteries and the bunkers definitely have a castle-ish feel to them and hit our fort criteria, there is actually a structure on the property that hits all of our checkpoints. And it is Alexander's Castle. The oldest structure on Fort Warden is this castle right here, built in 1886 by a Scottish man, John B. Alexander, who was, I believe, the rector of St. Paul's Episcopal, right down there in the Fort Warden area. And he purchased this land and built himself a castle, hoping that his bride-to-be would come and join him from Scotland. So he built this little castle. It's a sweet setup, actually, because the tower there has a water catch. It's essentially a giant funnel, and it pumps everything down into an underground cistern so that he could collect fresh rainwater and then store it for a long period of time. He ends up sailing home to Scotland to go and reclaim his fiancée, and finds that she was not willing to wait and married someone else in the interim. So he moves back into his castle of desolation until he eventually sells it to the U.S. military as the first of their defensive structures. And it is now a place that you can stay. If you go to Fort Warden Most of the barracks and the officers' quarters are available to be rented as essentially hotel rooms. And Alexander's Castle, though petite, is on that list in there, and certainly a place worth going. See, we've got a vouch for it right there. But of all the castles in Washington State, one of my all-time favorites is the 1980s acid trip, Pat Benatar fueled dream, Trollhaven. Now, while the exact origins of Trollhaven are a little murky, imagine a luxury estate that David Bowie from Labyrinth painted with a colorful drug-induced brush, and you've got the now rental property, Trollhaven. I think it only has 5 official bedrooms, but can sleep like 20. It has its own private orchard, garden, forest, and cow paddock, complete with wizards, dragons, and, as the name implies, trolls. But here's where things get hinky, my friends. One of my favorite parts of this establishment is that there is a almost hidden underground layer. We're going to call it a pleasure dungeon, where 3 of the bedrooms are. And it is all red. It has a large jetted bathtub in the center, just unwalled with plenty of mirrors. And before you make any judgments on this place, I've stayed here twice. I've hosted 2 archery tournaments in Trollhaven, and I would do it again, quite frankly. Is the underground portion of this whole thing a selling point? You betcha. So take a look at the pleasure palace down here. It comes replete with spiral staircases, attractive wood and stone paneling, and weapons on the majority of the walls. Very, very attractive stained glass throughout the towers here. And plenty to go on. I feel like I need a break. It's hot in here after talking about Trollhaven. If you find the opportunity to go and explore Trollhaven, or better yet, rent it for your own party or event, you will find it just outside of Sequim, Washington. And it is basically waterfront. You have to cross the private orchard, which during the fall, they let you just pick as many apples as your heart desires. And they often do pumpkins as well. But you can just cross the private orchard and then you're right down on the waterfront there outside of Sequim. So it is, I can't recommend it enough, crazy enough. I don't know if I did a great job selling it before, but if I didn't already, there you go. Now, no real tour of castles in Washington would be complete without Stadium High School. It is not privately owned, and I'm going to make the argument that it's fortified, but in fact, not so much. But the original structure that Stadium High School is based off of is a privately owned French chateau with battlements and a wall. So it is designed in very much the brick-by-brick fashion of a French castle. The fact that it finds itself here right on the cliff sides of Tacoma, Washington, and serves as a public high school, I'm not going to count against it for our tour of the castle. While this is, I'm trying to think here, 25,000 square feet. And while the elevator will tell you that it's only 6 floors, I've counted 12 doing the private tours of this building. It was originally designed in the 1880s, opened not in the 1890s like they had hoped, but eventually in 1906 as a public high school, because the Northern Pacific Railroad that was going to open this as a private hotel for the well-moneyed people of the West Coast ran out of funding during the cattle crisis of 1873 and then hit another financial collapse in the 1890s and had to abandon this project entirely. What ends up happening to it, as I mentioned, is in 1906, the Tacoma School Board purchases it for a song and turns it into a public high school, which it has operated as ever since. I talk about it all the time on our virtual tours, but I think especially here, when you see the conceptual design that they were drawing for the stadium early on, you really get the majesty of it as a castle. And because it is up on a cliffside and is modeled after a French castle, I'm going to go ahead and give it the castle title. Plus, it looks like an American Hogwarts. Like, you can't tell me, looking at this with its snow-kissed courtyard, that it doesn't at least conjure the image of a castle. Another nice thing about it is the fact that it is home to a series of underground tunnels. And while the size, scope, and knowledge of these tunnels is ever changing, as the school district goes through notable efforts to seal them up so high school students go get trapped down there, the original building did come complete with a subterranean dog kennel and wine cellar, both of which those cavities are still underneath the school, although now safely sealed. But there is a series of steam tunnels that run underneath the school and still provide access to a lot of the pipes and heat down there. The school is on a boiler system today, although not the original boiler system. Looking at some castles out here, this is just outside of Paulsbo, Washington. It's another privately owned one, and you'd have to make the argument for it being well fortified. But to really hit the list, again, in the Yakima area, White Salmon, the town of White Salmon, has what is lovingly known as the White Salmon Castle here. Now, this is a private estate built just because the owner back in 1988 wanted a, you guessed it, 26-acre parcel along the White Salmon River, and had this European castle that he had seen traveling the world in his youth, and decided that he should build a home based on that. So it is built in the typical 13th century Gothic Spanish castle style. It is, of the castles in Washington state, I'm going to say, believe it or not, one of the bougiest, because it has its own private horse stable at the base of the castle. It does come with several acres of just champion horse grazing and training land. And as you take this virtual tour throughout the interior of the building here, it's just deluxe. It has been used for several weddings, but nothing that I know of has ever been filmed there. And their website is currently down. So I don't know within the last 2 years since I've been out there if it's still available to be rented as an event venue location. But hopefully it still is, because it has rooms that are available for it, and it's not just a private residence anymore. They use it not quite like an Airbnb, but if you're going to have a large civil gathering there, they give you the opportunity to do so. But you do have to go up all of these Spanish mission steps to the top of that tower there. There is no elevator in the 6-story building, but if you can see in the top of the castle here, you will be rewarded with some breathtaking views of the river from the panoramic bedroom at the very top there. Another honorable mention today, while a former trading / military installation for the Hudson Bay Company, and then eventually converted as part of another 1930s Public Works Act, up to local tourist destination Fort Nisqually in Point Defiance Park, does get at least a castle nod. I know it's not a castle. It is 100% a fort, but if I didn't at least mention it, someone would have been upset with me. So there it is. It's on the list. Which brings us back to modest Castle Staudinger, the beginning and the end of our virtual journey tonight, which unfortunately no longer stands outside of the Spokane Valley. It has been part of a lingering history, and the stories of Castle Staudinger will linger forever and always. But that, my friends, is for another virtual evening. I want to just let you guys know briefly that we are now back full bore in action. If you would like to join us for some exciting stuff coming up, our tour of Black institutions in Tacoma is coming up this month, as well as our tour of the life and times of Captain George Vancouver in the Puget Sound. We are going to be doing our virtual tour of 10 Things I Hate About You in Stadium High School and Ghost Towns in Washington State. That said, if you've enjoyed your tour tonight and you'd like to show your appreciation, you can always find our PayPal button on the homepage of prettygrittytours.com. Pretty Gritty Tours is now 100% virtual, and we are living purely on the generosity and support of viewers like you. So until in-person tourism comes back, hopefully this year, we're just providing these virtual programs through generous sponsorship of people in the area, and of course, through all of you. So thank you guys so much for joining me tonight. If you have any thoughts or recommendations of things you would like to see this year, please let me know in the comments. I'm always game for an adventure, and I love doing research. So thank you again. I will see you guys for our upcoming roster of virtual tours in the area. As always, I'm Chris Staudinger. Keep on exploring.